Welcome back to Mayday. I'm your host, Trevor May, 10-year Major League vet, and this is the show where I rant about everything in the baseball world and the sports world beyond. Today's show is going to touch on adjustments pitchers have had to make because of the new rules, using a lot of examples from my own experience, Trevor Bauer, how he's pitching, and what his future might look like, and we're going to cover a New York Met reliever that you may not have known is having one of the best seasons of anybody in the league. Hey there, it's a brand new episode, and I am so excited to talk about the things we are going to get into today. I was going back through the old archives, and I found a video I made on the day that I went on the IL last year for anxiety, April 19th, breaking down what I was feeling, seeing, and like adjustments that I thought were going to need to be made because of the rule changes that were put in place at that time. It's really enlightening now looking back a year later and seeing how I actually made those changes and how they actually worked. A lot of them did anyway. And so I thought it'd be interesting to start there today because it's rare that I have actual like audio proof of where my brain was at, and then and compare and contrast that to how things then turned out. So this is from April 19th. I struggled to start the year. Just for context, high ERA. I think I was like in a 10 or something at this point. I only had like 6 appearances, but still, I was riding high on some emotions, and it's anxiety related too. So I was just talking about the negative effects that the rule changes seem to have around the league. And then I will take you through some of the things I put in play and how they work, different ways I thought about it. And you'll maybe be able to see how a lot of these same adjustments have been enacted by different guys around the league and how they've changed from year over year. And especially in the group of veterans, guys that were used to a certain way of doing things, especially at the big league level for many, many years, and then having to change later in their career. It's really interesting. So check that out right now. Today is my first day on the IL for anxiety. Today's not about that. It's about talking about how the rule changes have changed pitching in maybe more nuanced ways than you may think. A few days ago, the MLB posted a graphic showing how great the rules are and how well they're working. Something about this graphic, it only has offensive stats. So as a pitcher, my job is to prevent runs from scoring. As a hitter, they're supposed to create runs. You're going to notice something with these rule changes, that they were all done in order to create runs, therefore making preventing runs actively harder. So it's like a zero-sum game. When one thing gets easier, the inverse gets harder. And as someone who is only a pitcher, it's kind of hard to watch every single rule go against me and my brethren. So, but it's just reality. Like, there's nothing to do about it. So let's talk about some of the effects of these things going on. As of today, the average four-seam fastball velocity is down almost a mile an hour. The average ERA is bumped up by, I think, a third of a run. Average pitches per inning is up 2 per inning. And the average walk rate has increased by 0.7 per 9, which is a 1.1% walk increase total, which is, anyone who is familiar with the percent of walk rate statistic knows that is an insane increase. So the walks are way up. Many of these walks are coming in bunches, in strings, because of the inability to slow the game down. Now, it's pretty clear that I was frustrated that day, and there was a lot going on. So I that's understandable. I try to give myself some grace for that because, I just kind of went on the IL for something brand new that's a little bit embarrassing, a little bit hard to talk about, and I was just kind of struggling with it. So the part of this was therapy, honestly. It's just like talking about it, even if it's just to a camera. And I didn't know if I would ever do anything with this video, but I wanted to record it either way so I could kind of sort out my thoughts. That's how I function. I'm doing a podcast right now. This functions similarly to that. I just like sharing these things because, a lot of people won't have the experiences that I had, and so they'll never be able to have this thought process, and I just thought it'd be interesting. So a little bit to unpack here and a little bit to clarify. Some of those statistics The statistics I was using was just to show how it's changing the game and how pitching is showing the effects of these adjustments they're having to make. That walk total was 1.1% of total batters went up. So it's like it went from like 8% to 9.1% of total hitters were being walked, which is it is crazy. That's literally like everybody's went up almost one walk per nine, which is a very, very large bump. Now it evened out a little bit through the rest of the year, and these were year-over-year stats. So this was like through April 19th the year before, right? This was 2022 versus 2023, and with the changes, all the ERAs went up, velos went down because guys aren't able to recharge, aren't able to, get their maximum velo on their pitches, and generally velos were going down across the board. And I think they haven't gone down overall because as the season goes on, people got used to it, and those velos kind of leveled out again. But there is something to that, and so watching a bunch of statistics all kind of get collectively worse brought out a level of frustration. And I was like, why though? What is the cause? What parts of these things are happening? And the last thing I just said there is unable to slow the game down. Now let me touch that. That's going to be the theme. Slowing the game down has been historically, pretty much since the inception of baseball as a whole, as the number one thing to learn as a young guy. Like, when you have lack of experience in some things, there's a lot of uncertainty involved. Like you've never experienced what it's like to get in trouble. You've never experienced what it's like to have success. You don't know like what feelings you're going to have, and that's scary. And so when that happens, and you get these like things are a little bit bigger, like if you feel like you're small, or you're being crushed by the moment or whatever, it's very easy to want to fast forward through that and just get through it, and so you don't have to feel that anymore. And when that happens, you speed up, which then makes the problem worse, right? At least in terms of the performance. Like the best way is to like manage these things is to be successful. And if you're trying to speed through it and fast forward through the competition side of things, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to take shortcuts. And that is something that, pitching coaches, veterans, and guys with experience have learned, is that if you're able to pump the brakes a little bit and slow yourself down, it gives you an opportunity to then manage that feeling of wanting it to be over already. And so you'll make better decisions in the moment, because that's what it comes down to. Like these better decisions moment to moment, it's just a collection of moments. And so slowing the game down is like your number one. It's your multi-tool, your Swiss Army knife in your toolbox of being successful, is being able to slow the game down and like collect your thoughts. And the pitch clock effectively, at least at the beginning, now it's adjusted slightly where guys have found a way to adjust how that tool's used. So slowing the game down maybe isn't time-based as much as it is like you're inserting a pickoff, or you're using one of those other levers at your disposal to like mimic the giving yourself a little bit of time to collect your thoughts, or even collect yourself physically. And it's not the same, but guys have found ways to do it, and I did as well, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. At the end of the day, slowing the game down was the number one rule. It was pretty easy, especially when there was no, timer ticking down telling you to go, 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 go. And then what we saw was that feeling of being sped up got into a bunch of guys' heads that had not had to think that for a very long time, and we saw results reflect that, myself included. I was walking the house. I was walking way more guys than I'd walked since my rookie year. I had not walked that many guys. I'd taken pride in my ability to throw the ball over the plate, and for whatever reason, especially when you have new catchers, I got a young guy, Shea Langoliers, behind the plate. I had Carlos Perez, who didn't have a lot of experience catching me, and he doesn't catch that much also, and it was just hard to get on the same page when you're just you feel like you're in a VCR on fast forward. So that sucked. So I thought, wow, the game no longer can be slowed down. And like I said, it can a little bit, but like not in the same way. And that was really, really frustrating, because I was a guy who needed to slow the game down because of the anxiety, right? Sometimes it was worse than other days, and I had to have some way, some strategy in order to get myself in the right mind space and not want to be like, I just want to get out of this situation. And the best way to do that is just to like throw the ball over and over and over again, and not think about what I'm doing, and just kind of get there. It was like my kryptonite, and basically the clock being introduced brought my kryptonite back, something that I thought I'd worked through, and now I had to try to work through it again, and that was insanely frustrating. You combine that with the fact that the entire league started to use the pitch comm, right? And our organization wanted to use the pitch comm exclusively. They didn't want to use signs at all because they just didn't want to deal with it. The pitch comm is so much slower than putting signs down. It's amazing. So not only do we have a timer now we have a strategy for communication that is literally 3 times slower than the old one. So now we're putting two wrenches in the system at the same time, and you can't solve both problems at once. And my frustration went through the roof from that. So these were 2 major issues that needed to be addressed, but I did address them when I came back off the IL. The interesting thing about this was how hard it was, because the catchers were like, dude, we're just trying to get used to this too. Like, I'm doing my best here. And it was one of those things where everyone was really just doing everything they could to fix the problem. But like, the atmosphere and the environment didn't allow for an adjustment because it was just thrown through. So hearing me say this, does it make sense, my frustration with how rule changes are done? Not the rule changes themselves, it's how they're done. Adjustments are the name of the game, but there needs to be a little bit of grace period for adjustments to be made, and that just wasn't done for sticky stuff. That wasn't done for they're like, oh, do it in spring training. Spring training games are not major league games. They're not. They really aren't. It would have been interesting to see, like, if they go for 2 months, we're going to do pitch clock, but there's no pitch violations, and we're going to keep track of how many guys are outside of that clock. And instead of just throwing you in the fire, that probably would have been a better situation that gave guys an opportunity to adjust. But that, honestly, the byproduct of them not being able to adjust was more runs being scored, which overall is what the commissioner's office in baseball want. They want that anyway. So, like, worst case scenario, everyone's going to pitch bad and guys are going to score a bunch more runs, and we're going to win in the end at the end anyways. So, I mean, I'm empathetic to that. I get it, but like, it's, when you're a pitcher, you're like, well, F you, dude. Like, screw you guys. Like, it's already enough that none of you have ever played or done anything on the field, and now I have to listen to you just like actively make it harder for me to do my job because you think something's going to work that no one agrees with you on. So that's where a lot of this, vitriol comes from. And now that I'm not playing, I think that now I'm able to kind of get into it a little bit more. So here's some adjustments I made. I hope a lot of this stuff makes sense. I'll try to make it as clear and concise as humanly possible. First things first, when I came back, I made it very clear to both catchers, when no one is on base, when nobody is on base at all, and then it eventually became, as long as no one's on second, we are just going to go with old-fashioned signs. And I'm just going to chance the sign stealing because that's the least of my worries right now, because I can't pitch effectively at all if I'm waiting for the pitch comm constantly. So I did that. We said we're going to do signs, and we're going to do all that, and then we'll do pitch comm with the guy on second. And what happened over time was, as we worked through signs, I was able to get really on page with the catcher, so that when guy did get on second, I wasn't having to shake near as much because we had the rapport at that point. Like, we had seen enough signs, they'd called enough pitches, and it happened quickly enough to where they had an idea of what I wanted to do, and it just became a non-issue. So going to signs, one of the better things that I did. I also put the remote on my own gloves just in case we just couldn't get on the same page for whatever reason. And I had a very clear idea so like we could just skip signs altogether. I used it a little bit. It's funny, like 3 of the 4 times that I remember specifically to be like, oh, this pitch is going to work. I gave up a walk-off homer to Adley Rutschman. Nothing ever went right when I did that. So I'd stopped using it because I got a little bit superstitious, and that's very baseball-y too. So, but I did have it, and that tool was there, and it was a little bit of peace of mind. Like, if all hell breaks loose and if everything falls apart, I still have this. So I would wear it for a while. And then towards the end, Shay and I were so dialed in together that I just didn't even put it on my glove anymore. Then I had to completely revamp the way that I made decisions in the moment. Like, the way that I wanted to approach a hitter, I had to standardize it as opposed to having a bunch of information in my head that I had to sort through and grab. So when I used to prepare for teams, I would be like, okay, so this guy's this pitch, and this is this zone, this and that, and this. And like, I know a lot about a lot of guys, and my brain works that way. I can retain that information. I can be very prepared in that way, but I need time to kind of go into the archives, grab the thing I need, and then make the decision, and then lock in and do the thing. Like, my process was kind of a lengthy one. It worked, but it was a lengthy one, and the clock shortened that. It just shortened it by its nature, and so I found that I started to skip steps in that process that locked me in. I wasn't actually taking my centering breath, go, like I wasn't getting that breath anymore. And I noticed that because I felt like I didn't have time. So I was subconsciously rushing myself from the moment I started warming up until the time I came out of the game. And that just spelled disaster for me. So I had to change these things. And one of the big changes I did was started thinking in tunnels. And anyone who's seen me talk on Foul Territory, when I talk to Jason Adam or anyone else on the Rays organization, I talk a lot about why the Rays are good, and it's because they use this, and I noticed it. No one told me from their organization. I just noticed it watching guys in the bullpen that weren't struggling, because at this time, remember, they started like undefeated for the first 12 games of the season. They were absolutely shoving. So I'm like, what are the Rays doing so well? And I went and I watched them, and I figured it out. They have a very simplistic tunnel-based system for how they make a pitch decision. So I'm like, they pick a one target, that catcher gives that one target, and they throw every pitch off that, and then they build their game plan from there. But that's where they start. So I'm like, okay, if I can start with my catcher is going to be in this spot every time. I don't have to think in, out, up, down. I know where I'm trying to go, and he can adjust to me in real time, because at this point, just being over the plate is the more important thing, not being super fine and hyper command oriented, at least when I start an AB, and let's build off that. But I need to take it back to the simple version. And so that's what we did. I said, hey, this is the tunnel I use. All of my pitches go out of this tunnel. So basically, whatever the first pitch I'm throwing, and if I shake to a side of the plate, that's the tunnel I want to work out of. And the tunnels were just in or out to a righty. We just thought about it that way. Or right side of the plate, left side of the plate. Those were my two tunnels. And the one that I used more often than not was the right side of the plate, because of the way everything I throw moves. Like my slider would be a strike if I throw it to that pitch. My sweeper could be on the plate longer, and when it's off the plate, it's more likely to get a swing. My fastball runs up and into a righty and up and away to a lefty. The best situation, both scenarios, for my fastball, that's where it's most effective. And then my changeup is either down on the bottom of the zone or below and down and into a righty, which is exactly where I want my changeup to be. So if I throw to this up and in tunnel to a right-handed hitter, all of my pitches are the best versions of themselves. So let's start there, and we just work with that. So I go, this is my tunnel, Shay, let's stay there. And then if I needed a different way, then I will let you know in a simple way, like, hey, we're going to go with the other tunnel right now. And that's one way we simplified it. And that meant that I no longer had to go find a specific pitch. And it was more like, I'm going to throw this pitch to that spot, and it's going to give me the pitch that I need. And that allowed me to work quickly, because now I have two starting points, and it's pick one and go. So it's like instead of here's my 6 options, now there's 2 options. And that was honestly, that unlocked me. Also, instead of being out of the stretch the whole time, so that I had to change my leg kicks, and I had to go slow, go fast, go slide step, or not go non-slide step, or whatever. I started going out of the windup with nobody on base, so that when I took the step, and if I paused for a second or went really slow, the clock would turn off, but I'm still on. Now I'm on my own time. So it became this, like, if I need to go super slow and slow my body down, I can do it in the windup, and I can't do it out of the stretch if I'm only throwing out of the stretch. So I just added the windup back. I did that in bullpens as it came off the IL, and it worked. That combined with the tunneling ideas, like, just made it so approaching a hitter became much more simple. So then I completely revamped my scouting report as well, built a template on my iPad that then had a column for which tunnel I like to use against that guy, and then built my plan from there. So I'd be like, this tunnel's good, and this is why. These are the pitches that work the best. They don't handle this. They handle this better. And so I got to use all the same information that I had been using for years, but I got to use it in the framework of which tunnel does that work under, and it worked like a dream. There was 2 or 3 things I had to remember per guy, and I had 2 starting points to work with, and that's all I had to do. So, which starting point is it? Okay. And I remember this pitch. Okay. Boom. Let's go. And that's what my game planning became. And the clock suddenly stopped being an issue. I tested this by putting a clock on myself in the bullpen before I came off the IL. And we realized that last couple times I was nowhere near getting a violation, and I just stopped thinking about it, looking at it at all. And they're like, the idea is not actually to stay within the clock. The violations aren't that big of a deal. They're really not. It's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit embarrassing, but it's in the scope of things, it's not a huge deal. So the goal was to stop thinking about the clock, like removing it from my mind so it's not even a factor in my decision making. And once I felt that happen, I felt like I was ready to go. I thought about it that way, and that worked really, really well. And then so once I knew all this, I would constantly communicate it with Shay. We talked about it on the plane. We talked about it on the bus. We talked about it at lunch, at breakfast, at like before the game, after the game. And I'd ask him a question like, is this easier? Is this whatever? And we learned so much about each other, and we got a really good rapport going. And so once we got to that level too, where we were on the same page and that he knew exactly what I was trying to do, it was just, that was all she wrote at that point. And I probably had the best second half of any season I had my whole career, simply because I created the simplicity here where the clock then created like a rhythm for me. And when that rhythm started, the success followed. So those are the things that I adjusted, and the league also adjusted in a lot of ways too. Now, there are still some big difficulties, like guys who struggle to hold runners, for example. The pickoff move thing is still, I think, a little bit too much of an advantage for runners. Or just having a disengagement when nobody's on base, just maybe one an inning, I think would still help and still do a lot for helping solve not only this problem, but also the injury problem. Because like I said, the velos were dropping because guys were getting tired faster, because the less rest time you get between sets, it's just like if you were to go lift weights and just never rest between sets, you would fatigue much faster. It's the exact same thing for pitching. And to act like that's not a thing is just stupid and pisses me off. So there was some of that, but outside of injuries, it also was hurting the ability to throw the ball where I wanted to throw it mostly. So we saw the walk rate go way up. It never really normalized back to the 8%, but it did drop a little bit through the season as guys figured it out. So that was a lot. That was a lot to do in 1 year. But I think that the results speak for themselves, and I think they were adjustments that were necessary to make. But when you have to make massive adjustments like that in your career, that's like a thing you should only have to do once or twice in your career, not every single year, which I feel like everyone's having to change how they do things in kind of big foundational ways a lot. And that includes hitters too, guys who stepped out and needed to reset, now couldn't do it anymore. They struggled at the beginning. Like a lot of people didn't like that, and they still don't. But it's just, we got to give them we got to give the people what they want, and that's the point of an entertainment industry. So I thought that'd be interesting for you guys to hear. But just notice if you see got more relievers going out of the windup, that's really popular. More guys maybe not using the pitch count, using signs. Like a lot of this stuff has kind of spread back amongst the league, and you're seeing the adjustments being made in that way. And now next up, we have a subject that I have commented on very lightly in the last couple of years for a lot of reasons, mostly not knowing all of the facts. And to be honest, I'll never know all of the facts. This is just the way the world works now. But that is Trevor Bauer and his future with Major League Baseball specifically, and what I think might happen and what I think of the situation. Full disclosure, I actually scheduled a interview with Trevor after he was, talking and going kind of a little bit on his media tour in March, trying to, answer questions and just like make himself available to media outlets and such. And completely on my end, my fault is I got time zones incorrect. This was before the daylight savings time happened, so it was like an hour earlier. I was recording another thing, and I messed up, and I messed up the time that I told Trevor, and we have been unable to get that done. So this isn't supposed to take that interview's place. I still hope that happens because it's a conversation that I would love to have with him, especially because we both have the same name. Basically, what's prompting this is he just made a start in Mexico, a second start, where he struck out 14 batters in 6 innings, 6 no-hit innings, and basically just absolutely dominated the other team. His team's very good in the Mexican League, and he is very clearly a talent that is good enough to play, that doesn't need to play at that level. I think he's good enough to play in the major leagues. I don't think that that's actually being refuted. I frankly don't believe that this has anything to do with his talent and his ability as a pitcher in a vacuum. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that he would be a very good addition, just from a player standpoint, on a major league roster. That's exactly how I felt for a while now. It never crept in like, is he even good? Like, that never even happened. See also Colin Kaepernick with his whole situation and being, similarly blackballed from the league. And I believe that is what's happening to Trevor. And, these allegations were very serious at the time. And I think that it's definitely a situation now. And if you think about it this way, these are situations, especially when it comes to sexual assault, just allegations. Let's go back to before we knew all the details and before the court cases came to fruition, and we saw what the actual details and things were. Think back then, like when these types of things happen, you simply cannot afford to be wrong at that point. It's that serious of a thing, and societally, the idea of believe women is generally a new concept, just in terms of the court system, how long it's existed. And for years and years and decades and centuries, it was the people in power maintaining power, and those people were most often men. And if you needed to, railroad and deny a woman's claims to do it, that was just what was done. And that's just historical fact. The amount of violence against people is astronomically high, men to women. And so many of those cases go unreported for so many reasons. All the stats are out there. You can look them up. It has been and is still a major problem. However, this is what's happening in order to try to correct and get these things right. But there are steps to that. So I am in the camp of believing women is so important that it's going to be just locked in on and maintained, even when things like Trevor's situation happen, where the courts rule that things maybe didn't happen the way that they said they were being happen, and maybe they're trying to take advantage of him. Those situations are still going to happen, and those women are still going to be given the benefit of the doubt because of the nature of how society is trying to make these adjustments. And if a person doesn't serve legal consequences for the things they're doing under the law, and that maybe there were lies told and that's what came out later, then there should be some sort of opportunity to move on. And sometimes that isn't happening as quickly as possible, or at least the people don't feel like it is. And whether or not that's one of these situations is yours to determine. I just think, in my opinion, that long term, that should be the goal. It should be getting it right one way or the other. Getting it right should be the goal. You just got to do your best. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it too. And that's why I haven't really addressed it in a long time, because I wasn't there. I don't know all the facts. And I also wasn't super like following it closely and the legal proceedings and such. But now that I've done some research and seen kind of how things have shaken out, I do think that that's the system is working that way and is trying to get the consequences put where they're supposed to be put. So that said, let's talk about the future. And one thing you need to know, and this is going to be another conversation about Major League Baseball and how they handle things, but Trevor hasn't historically had the best relationship with Major League Baseball, even before all this stuff happened. It became one of those situations where they were just looking for any excuse to remove this thorn in their side, because one thing the commissioner's office, MLB, and all teams respond strongest to is PR. That is public relations. PR runs the entertainment industry. If you get bad PR, you have to distance yourself from that situation. This is how sponsors distance themselves from influencers when they say some weird stuff and they back up. If you're on whatever side you're on, companies, it's their right to do that stuff, and it doesn't matter what the thing is, and that's just capitalism. That's just the way you have to conform to the ideas of the people that pay you to some level or extent. And Trevor has a history of pushing back against this stuff. Things that I also honestly feel strongly about. Also, like we had kind of making a mockery of the sticky stuff, right? Trying to prove it in a combative way. We had showing how stupid arbitration is by taking, this 6.9 million, 420,000, whatever the 69,420 number as the number that he wanted in arbitration in order to show how silly and arbitrary it was. But it's literally called arbitration. Of course, it's arbitrary. There always had to be a point being made, and that would create public controversy, which also works to bring light to the conversation. So if that was the goal, he did a great job of that. He really did. Sticky stuff got banned because of this stuff that he did. It happened. He got what he wanted, but then he became the martyr. So the MLB didn't want to have to do things like that. They felt like they had their hand forced. And if they feel like a player is constantly forcing their hands to do things that they don't want to do, and pulling the levers of bad PR, which they hate, in order to drive the narrative and keep trying to take the narrative from them, then they are going to not like you very much. And as soon as something like this happens, where it's a serious enough allegation to where no one will second guess the suspension, they just jumped at that opportunity. And that's why we saw the biggest suspension we ever seen. It was an unprecedented situation too. So like they could make any suspension they wanted. That's all conjecture at this point, but like it comes down to PR. And so when it comes to the future, if you don't believe that this PR situation is going to be solved, then that opportunity is probably not going to present itself. So I'm under the strong opinion that the only way that he is given an opportunity in the major leagues again is if, it's able to be done quietly. The quieter, the better. And I don't know if there's any teams that believe that that's even possible at this point. So it's just kind of the way that it is. I think he's seen as someone who is going to draw attention in possibly a controversial way, because that is the way things work. It's effective. It works very well. And he has done a good job of that. To be honest with you, I also think arbitration's stupid. And I also was like, dude, the sticky stuff thing is crazy. But at the same time, if your way of getting the people that feeds you attention is by biting their hand, you might not be fed by them anymore. And I think that's what we see is happening. So would it surprise me one bit if this is kind of it, at least in terms of Major League Baseball and playing on the outside looking in these other leagues is going to be the way he has to move forward? It wouldn't surprise me if that's how he did do it. But fortunately, he has a very successful content creator situation going on. Fortunately, he has a lot of other things going. And I think that financially, he's going to be just fine. But I don't know that for sure. But if I were to guess, I would say that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is just wanting to play baseball, because at the end of the day, he does just like playing. I don't know if that's the right way to do things. I just know that that's something that is within the group of baseball in MLB's right to do, is to not give opportunities. And that's what they're sticking to. They're just like, we're not going to put ourselves in a position to possibly have to deal with something outside of the realm of baseball, because it's hard enough already only worrying about what's going on the field. So that's where we're at this point. I think that he's going to be very successful in the league he's playing in. I think he's a very good pitcher. I just don't know if that opportunity is ever going to present itself. And I don't know what can be done at this point to remedy the situation and to show that, like, if I am in that clubhouse, there won't be an issue. It might be a trust that needs to be built over a longer period of time. And, as baseball goes and you age, you just don't have as much time to do that, to repair a relationship. So we will see what happens. That's my take. And that's what I see. It's not talent. And it's not ability. That is pretty clear. He's a good pitcher, and he has had success in the years since his suspension. And so it just comes down to if a team is willing to take what they perceive as a chance. Whew. That was a heavy subject. So let's get into actual baseball stuff, which I am really excited to touch on this guy. Last episode we talked about Julio Rodriguez, and real quickly before we move on, I just want to point out that in the last 6 days since I did post that, Julio's hitting 375 with a 900 OPS, and it seems to have turned his season, back on the right track. And it seems like he's hitting those pitches that I said he would start hitting. He's swinging at those pitches in. He was chasing it off the plate, and according to my heat maps that are in front of my face right now, he's hitting now the ones that are over the plate, as opposed to 3 inches in off the plate. And so the barrel rate has gone up. He's hitting everything harder. He finally hit his first home run, which was on a fastball in, and it was a big boy homer. I was watching it live, so I'm going to take credit for that. So good to see Julio kind of start picking it up. I can't wait to watch him play more in person up here in Seattle. But let's talk about another guy, a guy who kind of seemingly came out of nowhere, a guy who maybe people didn't know were even going to make the roster on opening day, and has turned into an absolute weapon for the New York Mets. And I am obviously talking about Reed Garrett. Reed joined the team. Michael Tonkin was the long guy at that point, but Reed looks like a multi-inning guy. They're like, hey, we're going to use you in these situations to go cover a bunch of outs. Maybe when a starter struggles a little bit. He had I believe he had like a 5.5 ERA going into this year in the big leagues, kind of bouncing around, playing for different teams, trying to find ways to work. But if you've listened to any of the Rates and Barrels podcast with Eno Saris and Derek Van Riper recently from us, we have talked about the year of the changeup / splitter. That is the meta this year. That last year was the sweeper. The year before that, it was the gyro slider and the hard slider and the four seam fastball before that. So like every single year, a new pitch kind of comes in vogue, and everyone's trying to learn it, or someone figures out how to design a pitch, and then that spreads through the league, and everyone adds their own twists and their own ways, and they do more research. It's almost like a research project where hundreds of guys are now involved. It is no different with Reed Garrett and his splitter. Reed's got a splitter. He has 25 strikeouts in 12 2/3 innings. That is good for on almost 18 K per nine. Just to put that in perspective, that is higher than Edwin Diaz K per nine was in 2022, which is one of the highest of all time. And so he is striking out almost 2 per inning. 2 of every 3 outs he gets a strikeout. Of those 25, 14 of them are on the splitter. 7 of them are on the sweeper. So of the 2 meta pitches from the last 2 years, 21 of his 25 strikeouts are on one of those 2 pitches, with double going to the splitter itself. According to the heat maps, he's throwing the splitter literally never in the zone. So he's got great movement on it, first of all, but what you need to know about off-speed pitches, and by off-speed I mean changeups and splitters. Here's a little rule of thumb. Off speed is used for anything that's not a breaking ball, and then breaking ball is used for everything that breaks. Like, it's just to kind of differentiate, because everyone throws different kind of variations of all these. They're like, I throw a splange, I throw a splinker. I also love putting 2 words together. So, but when people say it's like splinker, like it's this crazy new pitch, it's usually just like, oh, it's just a splitter that doesn't move as much as other splitters, and it's harder. So it's like somewhere between a sinker and a splitter, but that's a splitter. So I get it. It just sounds funny to me. So actually, I just changed my mind. Splinkers are great. Keep saying that. Thank you, Paul Skeens. So he's been throwing that thing like crazy, and it has been almost never in the strike zone. And when it is, it's on the very bottom of the strike zone. So he is getting astronomical chase on that pitch. Now, long term, that is not a winnable strategy, simply because major league teams will be able to tell that you never throw a pitch for a strike. And then once they start to take a few that are really close and really nasty that they've been swinging at, the confidence in that pitch plummets. When you get a lot of chase on a pitch and then suddenly you're not getting chase on it, it's hard to just get that confidence back to throw it into the strike zone. And so just know that that's probably going to level out a little bit, that whiff rate anyways, and that chase rate, because you can't depend on a chase rate like that for 162 games. Guys adjust just too well, and especially in big like leverage situations when they tighten up even more. And like I said, he was kind of bridging a little bit as a long guy bullpen piece a little bit at the beginning, so he wasn't in those like 3-2 game in the 8th inning situations. If he does get put into those situations, we probably see that splitter chase change for the worse a little bit and level out a little bit. So expect that to happen. That said, it's so good and it's been swung at so much that there is something with the tunnel and with deception that is making it one of those pitches that has an element of, I know it's coming, I still can't hit it. So if he does see that everyone's taking it and then starts to throw it in the strike zone and then able to move it out of the strike zone when he needs to, that's the type of thing you want to look for a pitch to see if it's going to work long term. And so that element exists. It seems like it does. We'll just see if he can make that adjustment as guys start to spit on it a little bit more and refuse to chase it out of the zone. And especially at the end of an AB, like with 2 strikes or as a put away situation. So pay attention to that. If he starts to get behind a little bit more in those mid counts, those 2-2 counts, those 1-1 counts, and not getting the chase on the splitter, then know that might be the league starting to make an adjustment, and then see how he adjusts from there. That said, the sweeper is also a high-quality pitch and has been even more effective. He's given up no hits. He's given up 1 hit on the splitter, but 0 on the sweeper in 10 hitters have an action on it, and he's got 7 strikeouts. So 7 strikeouts of the 10 outs he's gotten with his sweeper have been strikeouts. So that's another pitch. So he might have 2. So now we're trying to eliminate 2 pitches. Yes, the sweeper's also being chased, but they're 2 very different pitches. And if people have to worry about both, that adjustment to spitting on one gets harder to do because you might hit the other one. So that also shows that this the longevity of the success could be there. So pay attention to that too. Is the sweeper being taken, and is the splitter starting to be taken, the ones that are close, that are over the plate, then off the plate? And if they are, that is the league adjusting. And if he finds that he has to throw his fastball even more often, then that could spell a little bit of a regression to the mean. But that said, up till now, it's been pretty damn impressive. 12.2 innings, 7 hits given up. He's given up 1 solo home run. He's only walked 4 guys, which a great walk rate is under 3 per 9, which in this day and age is solid, especially for a reliever, and 25 strikeouts. So the numbers speak for themselves. It is very impressive start of the season for Reed Garrett that a lot of people haven't seen, but pay attention to how he moves forward, because he has one of those pitches that is now becoming one of the most effective things because of how hitters have adjusted to breaking balls. And as relievers start to throw splitters more, the league will adjust. And Reed Garrett will be a great way to monitor how that league is adjusting. I hope that was interesting. If you guys want to hear more about that stuff, I want to touch on a player maybe every episode. I think that would be something that would be fun to do, but also let me know in the Discord. Again, that is discord.gg/Trevor May. Also, the link will be in the description of the show, and go and we have conversations there. I'm trying to make sure I am there more often, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I am Trevor May, and just let me know what you think there, or ask me questions, or be like, hey, can you touch on this? Can you talk about that? I'm always looking for topics, and you are the ones that they're for. So it would be great to hear from you. And always leave a 5-star review anywhere you can, or a comment on the show in YouTube, because we have a YouTube version of the show. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have a good time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will see you next time on the Mayday Podcast, where we rant about all this stuff. Have a good one. Bye-bye.